Welcome to Behind the Knowledge, a best hour podcast where we dive deep into the lives and stories of inspiring coaches from all walks of life. The two hosts of this show are me, Pat Barber, and my good friend and fellow coach, Todd Acuto. Each week, we'll sit down with the most amazing coaches we can find, uncovering their unique paths, the challenges they've faced, and passions that continue to drive them. Whether you're a seasoned coach, an aspiring one, or simply somebody who likes listening to stories of how people achieve the success that they have, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by the powerful stories and insights from the world of coaching. This is Behind the Knowledge. Let's jump in. All right, we are back with another episode of Behind the Knowledge. This time we've got a super extra special one. I mean, I've got Todd here as always because Todd's Todd and he's here doing his thing. But we've got Johnny Welbourn or John Welbourn or J Money or JW. And funny thing is, we were talking right off camera before this. I don't know when the last time I saw John was. Like, since I've seen John last, I've had 4 children. John's gone on to conquer the entire sports strength industry. And he has been like, our circles have been close, but not actually connecting. And we think the last time we saw each other was like 2009, maybe bumped into each other at like 2010 or something like that. But I've watched John from afar for a very long time. And very recently, John was on a number of podcasts and some social spaces and some other things, having some clashes with the likes of Mr. Andrew Hiller, as well as there was one about on Savon and stuff. And more than anything, I wanted to reconnect with John and hear his coaching journey, because I actually don't know what that is. But beyond that, we want to I want to understand John's perspective on everything. And we were going into nuance and whatnot, but we'll get that in a moment. But before we begin into all of that, John, how the hell are you today?
I'm good. Everything's going pretty well. I got John McPhee, who we had on the podcast earlier this week, who's like a former Delta guy. He was on Joe Rogan and just kind of like a pretty storied guy. He was like Tim Kennedy's boss, at some point. And then, he hunted Saddam Hussein, and just kind of like a pretty storied guy. He's been on, Sean Ryan's podcast. He was on Rogan. And I ended up meeting him through a mutual friend in kind of a weird way. We went to the actual F1 together in Austin. And we just hit it off and been on the podcast. And then I started helping him with his training because he's getting ready for World Masters for Jits. And he's like 54 years old, and he's a purple belt, and he wants to win World Masters. So I do jiu-jitsu here in Austin and train some of the top jiu-jitsu players in the world. And so he came into our group and has been training with us, showing up and kind of just working through Shanji and Lovato, their kind of, I don't know, like you call their circles. And so he's been coming to Austin. We've been helping him with his training. So we jumped on the podcast. And so I did that a couple of days ago. We just launched that. And then we're going to go out and shoot some content today at the range. So that's what I'm going to do after this. So just for the most part, just trying to improve upon myself. But it's been fun because, like I said, we trained some of the top guys in the world in jits. And watching them, like Victor and Philippe just fought at UFC Fight Pass, and Victor was the main event and had a huge win. And then we got a good group of guys, so it's been a lot of fun and something I picked up as well. So I get to train a bunch as well.
Hell yeah, man! And I had no idea about any of this, and I apologize for not knowing your entire discography and everything that's going on. But I've been so buried in trying to raise children that I don't do any podcasting anymore, or any like, I'm on a few podcasts, but like I don't listen. I don't involve myself in the conflict of anything. Like, my main thing is I like to just fight Todd about how much I hate Paul Saladino. But other than that, like there's no drama that I get into.
I don't disagree with any of that. Paul is kind of insufferable. And so I agree with you on that.
Before we start going too far down all those rabbit holes, where most of the people probably listening to this know of you is from your days with CrossFit football, which now is turned into Power Athlete, correct?
Yes.
And so we know you as former NFL football player, and we'd love to hear your coaching journey. Where did that start? I would assume with your personal training yourself, right?
It's I never thought of myself as a coach. I was just an athlete that tended to find really good people. And I knew good coaches. I mean, I played for a ton of bad ones. I worked with a bunch of bad coaches. And I knew what worked and what didn't. The only problem is for me, I'm the type of person where if you tell me I can't do something, I think I'm going to do it. So where I succeeded was in spite of a lot of really shitty coaches. And it's funny because I have 3 kids as well. And, my kids are going through, like my daughter plays in a select basketball. My other daughter, soccer, rides horses. And my son plays flag football and baseball and does jits. And it's pretty interesting going out and coaching his flag football and trying to like work with these kids and realizing how bad of coaches I had growing up. My baseball coach used to drink beers and get shit-faced before practice and then come out there and just hit balls at us and fucking yell at us. I had another guy that was probably another drunk too, that like is a basketball coach. And so I had some really shitty coaches. And then I played for horrible high school football coaches that were, pissed off at their life and, mad that they were teachers and fucking hated the world. And they came out and just literally just verbally abused and physically tried to kill us. And it was very interesting, the string of shitty coaches that I went into, almost to the point where I thought for a long time it was me. And then as an adult, you grow up and you realize, and you're like, oh, no, those guys were just assholes.
Yeah, right.
And
where were you growing up?
I grew up in Southern California, but I mean, I'm not kidding. Like I had a basketball coach who was a terrible dude. He would like show up, kick basketballs at us and yell at us. And like he told me when I was in 8th grade, he told me I was the single worst athlete he'd ever coached. And that when I went to go play football that next year, I'd play 1 year and quit. And I show up and I'm like pretty good at football and I end up getting a scholarship and I'm like a senior in high school. Season had already ended. They got asked us to come out and kind of like work with like a bunch of like kids that were at like a football camp. And I fucking see the dude and he's walking and my brother's with me. My brother played college football and he was kind of home for the summer as well. And my brother's like, isn't that motherfucker that coached your basketball? And I was like, yeah, that's the guy that would like yell at us in this whole thing. So we're like, hey, his name was Mark. We're like, Mark, what's up? And we start kind of jogging at him, kind of like in the Goodwill Hunting deal where he's like, oh yeah, we Carmine, we went to middle school together, right? And the dude sees me and takes off running. And my brother and I chase him to the car and he like locks himself in the car and I'm trying to pull the door off. And it just like, man, I just think like, it's really changed now. Like fathers are out there. Everybody wants to be, it could be social media and there's a phone for people to be able to kind of chronicle dickhead coaches. Right. But it's pretty nice to see how good these coaches are in there. I mean, and I go talk to them as well. And I've coached and it's always a good indicator that you're doing a good job where like the kids see you outside of sports and they're like, Mr. Welbourn, coach, what's up? And so they're always real cool with me because I always remind them, I'm like, hey, this is the most fun you guys are ever going to have in your life. And I remember the day that it was fun, and I remember the day that it stopped being fun when it became a job, where all of a sudden you went out there and you were basically just trying to take blood for money. And so I remind these kids, I'm like, you guys aren't winning Letterman's jackets. Nobody's getting a scholarship. We're out here to have a good time, and these are the memories you'll remember. So I've been really good, obviously playing 10 years in the NFL, being around some really great coaches and some really mediocre ones, and realizing you get to a certain point and you cannot let that coach stop you from being great. And I think that idea of attaining greatness came from myself and also in the training and finding people that believed in me and then being able to be able to have a good skill set. So obviously when I retired from the NFL, I never really thought about being a coach. We had kind of opened a gym and I was training some people, but it was more just because I had the space and there were some people that wanted to train people. And it really wasn't until Greg asked me to do CrossFit football that I even thought about coaching people on a massive scale. And what was ironic about that, and where I was on Judd Leinhart's podcast, he asked me about like the origins of CrossFit football, and more importantly, like where it came from. And I told him it came from a conversation with Greg. That Greg asked me if I thought CrossFit was an athletic form of training, and my comment was like, no. This is how I understand athleticism. This is where this thing is really biased. And I feel like if you wanted to make it better and more athletic, you could do this to improve upon it. And he said, well, great, you go fucking do it yourself then. And I was like, okay.
How did you come across, how did that interaction, how did you meet Greg?
So I was living in Newport Beach and I was traveling up to Carson to go train at Athletes Performance with all the other pro athletes. And anybody that's lived in Newport Beach and has to drive to Carson, it's only like 18, 20 miles, but that might as well be, it could be 20 minutes, or it could be 4 hours with LA traffic. And I got to the point where I just couldn't do it every day. I was like, fuck, dude, I'm so tired of driving. I actually had a motorcycle and I used to just get on the fucking carpool lane and just zoom up there. And I'm basically driving this like nasty Hayabusa. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm going to die. Like, I can't do this. I'm lane splitting. I'm like, this is dumb. So I just said, hey, I'll go up there a few days a week to do all the agility and all like the sport specific stuff, but I'll just lift weights around here. And so I did a little bit of Google, and there was a place that had bumper plates and Olympic lifting up the street from me. It was called CrossFit Newport. I walked in and didn't know what CrossFit was and started training there. And the owner of CrossFit Newport, Brian McKenzie, who did CrossFit Endurance, ended up talking to CrossFit, and Brian was telling them that, hey, these NFL guys playing here, and it kind of like guys would show up, and I met some people, and then they asked me if I wanted to do the CrossFit Games, and
well, do you remember me at your first seminar?
Yeah, that was kind of like in that bridge thing. Like we had just started going there, and they were like, hey, you should go to this CrossFit level 1. And that was kind of like, I like showed up and yeah, that was it. I mean,
well, you kind of showed up just like as like you were,
paid attendee.
Yeah, exactly. You were a paid attendee, and it was quite a spectacle. Like I was like, this guy's enormous. Like I like, that was the first, you were easily the strongest person I had ever show up at one of those things. Like it was a notable difference, because I was like, well, this is, and then
I was still playing. Yeah, exactly. I just come off playing 17 games, and I mean, I'm still 6'6", probably 308 pounds, and like like here's the deal, and I think different than me than a lot of people is one, I'd like to believe I'm never too humble to learn something. So I wrote a blog post about this years ago, this idea of always be a white belt. I mean, I went to go do jiu-jitsu, showed up as a white belt, and it just so happens that my training partners are the best dudes in the world. And it's been really exciting. Like I like sucking at things and not being good. And I like that maturation process of like, okay, like you go from like not being good at something to being competent. And that's what really excites me. And I think the day that I lose that, it's probably the day that I need to fucking end it all. So yeah, showing up to that level 1, it was interesting, because the paradigm that I understood training and performance was based off of like some of the pillars that I'd worked with in sport and performance and playing in the NFL, and then you show up to this little gym in Santa Cruz.
And but you kind of had like this background of seeing the best of the best, in all honesty. Like you had the most elite performance at the time, and like professional football likely had the most investment, and the people who actually cared the most about movement and stuff like that investing their time into it. So you were coming from a different perspective than most. So that like I even remember watching you do the workouts and the whole thing, and you had this, was that your wife at the time, or was it a girlfriend, like this tiny little thing next to you, but maybe it was just dwarfed in size to you. I think I was 19 at the time. Maybe you were young. I was very young and immature. It was a great fun time. But I was kind of just, I don't want to take it too far back, but thinking about your first terrible coach that you had, how old do you think he was at the time when he was coaching you?
Probably in his like 40s, 50s.
Oh, so he was just a douche regardless. Okay, he wasn't like some young. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, well, I mean, so when I grew up, like, playing Little League baseball and basketball, it was father coaches. Like now it's like my daughter plays on a club team, and there's like a dude who's like legitimate job is to coach these kids. And like, he's a professional, and, ours was a bunch of like construction worker dads that were probably smashing beers at lunch and then show up with a bag and throw that shit out there and said, all right, like it's wild. My son, on the way to school, there's like a guy that has like a facility, and I take my son there a couple days a week, and he has these little micro 30-minute sessions where he teaches him to hit and throw. And, we go out and play catch, but this guy's like teaching him. And so then my son goes to like tryouts this year. He's 8, and he's playing this 10U, and like, he's got confidence and he's hitting the ball and he knows how to do everything. We didn't have any of that. Like my brothers and I were out there playing, like there was zero. Like I never went to a basketball camp. The way I learned to play basketball was where we got dropped at the bus. We would all walk, and my house was the first house, and we had a hoop. And so sometimes there was 30 kids, sometimes there was 3, and we played pickup basketball every day after school. And like, that was how we learned to play. Like now my daughter's got a coach, and this guy, like I went out, I looked at it last night, and this guy's teaching them to like slide and do all these things. And I'm like, fuck, we didn't have any access to this. Even when I went to high school football, the reason I was pretty good was my brothers played college football, and my brothers came back and they played offensive line, and they taught me technique. And so by the time I was in high school, my technique was good. And then the recruiters showed up, and they're like, man, like your technique's awesome. You're pretty technical. You move really well. I'm like, my brothers, if they didn't come home and teach me, I probably just would have been like some schlub that was just laying on people.
What do you think is too far for kids in terms of the investment and time into learning specifics? Because I know like there's quite a balance between parents who throw their kids into stuff at all time. Like the kids are in one sport to the next sport to the next sport, and their entire lives are governed by that whole thing. Where is that? Because I mean, you started off by saying like you talked to them about none of you guys are getting scholarships. Like this, not saying it like that, but like this is for fun. Yeah. We need to have this here.
Yeah.
Where is that? Where do you tread that line, or where do you kind of balance that? Or do you think?
So what I like to do is I like to periodize through sports. What I don't like is these people just play, like if they play volleyball, they just play volleyball. So like my kids have to do, if they're going to, play basketball, she got to do track. Jiu-jitsu is kind of the universal non-negotiable. Like they had to learn some form of grappling, some bit of fighting, something that teaches you to be close to people and to not be uncomfortable if somebody puts their hands on you. So that's just more of a self-defense. So, I grew up with two older brothers, and our favorite game was we used to just box and fight. And I, got into martial arts when I was 6. I got into boxing when I was 10, and I fought and I boxed all the way through high school. Went to Cal and then boxed on the Cal boxing team in the off season. And then the guy that trained me, Rafael Ruiz, Rafael was Antonio Tarver's fight coach. And so like my, boxing progression and my ability to use my hands was probably why I was able to play 10 years in the NFL and had a skill set where I was very good at judging, first meaningful touch, judging distance, cutting a guy's off. I learned all that within the ring and within boxing. So I didn't really understand wrestling or jiu-jitsu or grappling, no-gi or no-gi at all. And then this last off season, I started doing it just because I met Sanjay Obero, who's considered like one of the best to ever do jiu-jitsu. And so Sanjay and I became friends. He asked me if I would help him train some of his young guys, and now his young guys are some of the best in the world. And so I started doing it. And as I got into this, I was like, man, I wonder if this applies to football players. And so this offseason, Will Fries, who's the right guard for the Colts, who just ended up signing with Minnesota for like 5 years for $88 million. He hit me up and came out and trained with us for a bunch of weeks. And he said, hey, I'm going into my contract year. Can you help me? I said, yeah, come on. So he came out and we worked on his technique and just really showed him a lot of the little things that I did to be successful at my job, and just a lot of like the little nuances. He just needed somebody to kind of like chisel off a little bit of that, marble and just kind of help him and, just teach him a little bit about punch and how to move and just more importantly, like position. And we trained a bunch, and then I'd take him to jits every night and he would roll on our groups. And so Victor Hugo, who's, Victor's considered the top ultra in the world, 6'4", 270. And I'm still pretty big. And we got a lot of big dudes that come and train with us. So Will shows up at, 310, 315, 20 pounds. And we put him in a gi and we started working on a lot of like movement stuff. And I got to see the application in real time. And I thought, man, there's really a interesting application for jiu-jitsu and grappling and the no-gi, and especially in the gi with grips that applies into football. And it was a kind of a neat experiment.
That kind of like it speaks to exactly what you're saying for the kids is like, right, the idea of balancing things out with a broader spectrum of sport, but starting with a foundation that's quite physical and close and navigating your body through space. So, okay. So it's kind of you have
and how to move your body in relationship to other people. Like I think, I think it's multidimensional. I think you have to learn something that involves some sliding, whether it be skating, surfing, or snow. Your body like moving like on unstable surfaces, like let's say surfing or snowboarding.
Shredding the gnar. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I grew up, my mom's from Canada. I grew up skiing it too. I mean, we were one of the first people to ever snowboard at Mammoth. I mean, my parents bought a place there in the 60s, and we would go, 8 to 10 weekends a year. So I grew up skiing and I grew up at the beach and surfing. So I think that's important. Something that's combative, that involves you, using your body as, not a weapon, but like in a meaningful way against another person. And then something that involves hand-eye coordination, whether it be hitting a ball. So whether that be a basketball, something that's team-based, that's kind of open loop, I think is beneficial. So that's the way I kind of look at like their sport development. But at the end of the day, I just want them to have fun.
What about swimming?
I think swimming's incredible. My daughter swam a bunch. It was funny. She was swimming and she started getting sick. And I think it was just too much chlorine. We took her out of the water for 30 days and she all of a sudden her complexion got better. And the problem is they were pouring so much like chlorine in that thing. I think she just got soaked. I mean, it was 5 days a week for 3 hours in the pool too. Like, and that was another
geez.
thing I had issue with is here in Texas, people are pretty fucking extreme. And like, you take her, like, she's a pretty good swimmer, and they go through, and the coach is like, great, it's Monday through Friday from this. And I was like, so wait a minute, we went from like casually swimming to now you want to put them for 15 hours a week in the pool. And they have to go like there's no 3 day a week. And they're like, oh, you can come 3 day a week, but it's just a fitness class for the kids to swim. They don't go to competitions. If you're on the comp team, you got to swim this. And it's like, man, that's just too much. There's a better way to do it. But I think exposing them to a lot's important. But at the end of the day, they need to have fun. I think, for very, very few people in this world are going to go out and make money, like doing their sport, and are going to win a gold medal, play in the NFL. I mean, there's just very, very few and far between. So I think a lot of parents feel this need to like, hey, I need to give my kid this opportunity, and like, it might never happen. And I think a lot of the parents too have this almost like this desire, like, if only I had had this access, I'm going to give you the opportunity I didn't have. And so they push it, and I think it's fulfilling their dreams more than the kids, because you can see the look on the kids' face. I'm like, you guys having fun? Oh, my dad wants me to be here. Well, then your dad should be out here. So that's funny. I always invite a lot of the dads. I'm always like, hey, man, you should come do jits with us, and I'll fucking smash you. And then you're going to see exactly what your kids are going through. So it's fun. I have a good time with it.
It's interesting that you talked about like how bad the coaches were that you had growing up, which is the exact same thing that I had with any strength coaches I had growing up. It was always just like the gym coach or the baseball coach is going to teach you to weight lift, and they didn't teach you anything. But it sounds like it was the opposite for you, where you actually were able to come across some pretty high level like training coaches. Was your boxing was that prior to being in the NFL, I'm assuming, in college? Yeah. And so
and that was even growing up. Yeah, I mean, we had the typical ball coach, strength coach guy who, was a guy that used to lift weights, and he would teach us. I was very fortunate. There was a guy in my neighborhood who was a power lifter, a guy named George Zangus, and who owned Marathon Nutrition, Super Suits, and Wraps. And he used to invite kids over because he was still training in powerlifting to come over and lift with them. So I was invited over, and I trained in Zangus's garage, and got exposed to legitimate strength conditioning as a kid. At the right time, more so than just the high school fucking mess where there's, one strength coach with 60 kids, and you got upperclassmen coaching. I mean, it was awful. I just don't think that, there's so many more systems in place today. There's so many more options. And the issue is, with the internet and social media, there's so much more information. Years ago when I was in college, I went to Berkeley. I had this theory that what kept people dumb, or more importantly, where I kind of equated it to ignorance, came from lack of information. So I thought that maybe what causes ignorance or stupidity, or maybe people maybe just don't have access to all the information. Once people have access to the information, everything's going to step up, and everybody's going to be so much sharper. That was completely wrong. Because now we have the entirety of the world in our hands, and people have never been dumber. And it's shocking. And what social media and the internet has done is, because people are living their lives in small sound bites, they have no ability to understand nuance and different shades. For example, the deal with Hiller and those guys. I was on a podcast, and I was telling a historical story of how CrossFit football started 17 years ago with a conversation between Greg and I. That was it. I didn't say anything negative. He asked me, do you think it's athletic? I said, no. And then he's like, when I told him what I thought, he's like, great, you go do it yourself. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have endurance on one side, we're going to have CrossFit football on the other, and we're going to have CrossFit in the middle, and we're going to own the entire fucking spectrum of the industry. We're going to have endurance training, we're going to have power and sports training, and we're going to have fitness in the middle. And the mission seemed very, very clear to me. And it wasn't a negative in any way. It was a great conversation. Lauren was there. She was pregnant. And they said, hey, go get this done. I said, I'll be back in 30 days. 30 days later, I hit them up, and we launched CrossFit Football. 17,000 hits the first day. And then they said, hey, you got to go teach a seminar. I launched a seminar a few weeks later. And then I went on the road and taught 36 seminars that first year. So it was a conversation that started an entire SME that was unique in that it wasn't just teaching Olympic lifting that you use in CrossFit. It was literally you create your own version of CrossFit, we'll license it, and then you go out and teach a completely separate methodology, which is different than anything that they had ever done before and would never do again. So, I mean, that conversation was fruitful.
Yeah, and it held a really specific and an important place. I think it was, when it came out, it was never pretending to be
the CrossFit methodology of constantly varied functional movements executed at high intensity. It was very specific to sport specific football. It was like it existed in a place. I think people's confusion continued around their misunderstanding of what CrossFit was and the methodology, right? Yeah. So the second you tacked a name onto it, they immediately equated the two, and they were like, "It's the same thing," and you're like, "It's not close to the same thing. It's not with the same purpose." Different. I think where Hiller and those guys probably got off on their own thing was Judd's perspective on it is quite negative, and Judd's statements on that were like. But he clearly comes out from a place of. I also
didn't know that. So Judd I met at Summer Strong, and we had like just a very transactional introduction, and then he reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you come on my podcast?" Via Bert Soren. So that's kind of how I met him. And so we go. So then he went back and he started asking me all these CrossFit questions. I didn't know that he has made and like. Rightly so. No, I just didn't. Yeah. So I didn't know that he had been like kicking the hornet's nest with these guys, and he came out and like I didn't get that from him at all. And if you listen to the podcast, if you've ever heard me say anything about CrossFit, I've always been very, very positive in that, like, the movement to get barbells in people's hands and the training physiological effect of people showing up was positive. Now, when you get down into like the specific gym and the coach and the trainer, I feel like they could have upped that, but that came down to the individual's desire to improve upon himself. Yep. Do I think that they could have improved upon the methodology and let it continue to evolve and grow instead of kind of doing this like reaction to go back? 100%. I think that early on, Greg brought on some really good SMEs with like Coach Chris Summers. He brought on Ripito and Mark and Bergner and Rob Wolf. I mean, he brought in a lot of really sharp people. And, I think that the methodology could have evolved into something that was, and I think it did, with the CrossFit Games was kind of interesting.
So you think the actual core methodology for normal people, but not sport specific people could have evolved?
I think it could have. And I'll tell you why.
I genuinely want to know, like, I'm not trying to start conflict. I just genuinely want to know how you, from your perspective, want to.
I think the problem was not necessarily in the way it was written, but I think the practical application of the people are going to die for points, people are going to die for seconds. This idea of like I have to fucking set myself on fire every single day in the training space to potentially get more fit. I think there could have been a little bit different kind of cycling through different intensities, different kind of like, Joel Jameson, when you look at like, different heart rate zones and levels of intensity, I think there could have been a little bit better understanding, but that might have just been a misunderstanding of the actual methodology where, like constantly varied doesn't mean at 100% trying to fucking kill myself every day at max heart rate.
Totally.
But that's the way, like I watched people. Yeah, which I watched people come in and literally set their body on the funeral pyre every single day and try to burn it to the ground. Totally. And I remember being like, I think this is an issue. So we started trying to create workouts where I could like force people to move and take a rest and need you to do this and this, and they're kind of built into it. I think the problem is that, the message is always not interpreted as well as it could have been. So I think the message and the practical application of what we saw there, I think there was a disconnect. And
I think that's what's been a lot of our mission is to continue to refine the understanding of the message, right? Like the understanding of that you can't smack yourself in the face with a board every day and expect to see long-term success. And like, but like if we were to argue the nuance of it, I think that was encapsulated in Fitness in 100 Words. It was encapsulated in constantly varied functional movements executed at high intensity. High intensity, I think, is the hard part for people because it's going to be high relative to the individual effort. I
think we needed to get rid of high intensity. I think it needed to be like, at specific levels of like intensity. And the word intensity to me is always a percentage of 1RM. So it's not emotional. So like there was a lot of these like weird kind of like word games a little bit. And it was just, I think it was misinterpreted. And I think they could have evolved it if they had allowed it to kind of be like, hey, you know what, like this is where it is and this is where it progresses, instead of going back and creating zealots and throwing a stake in the ground where all of a sudden you have these Hiller guys that are, 2002, CrossFit, Greg, everything Greg ever wrote could never be improved upon.
Well, I think the idea is that, for me, at least from my perspective, is the more I challenge the subtlety of it, and the more I go back, like, it was there. It just needed to be refined in terms of its meaning. And, like, when it was first put out, it needed to be so punchy, and it needed to be so counterintuitive to the rest of the industry that people were like, just got slapped in the face with it. Right. I think to dull the statement by saying something. And I had this argument with, do you know who Sean Pastuch is from Active Life? He had a thing on constantly varied functional movements executed at varied intensities. And I was like, well, it's going to vary by design, like, depending on the movements that you're doing. When you vary the movements, when you vary the time domains, when you vary the individual efforts, and then you scale relative to people's physical and psychological tolerances. And then you also look to long-term overall growth, especially for normal human beings. Intensity will vary. It's going to be high relative to the individual day and effort and whatever it is. But, and there are still, I would also still say, like, if you're training 3 days a week, high intensity is probably the most appropriate for each one of those days. But if you've now got 4, 5, 6 days a week that you're training, you need some zone 2, you need strength specific days, you need all these other things. And I think that was, I'm not saying that Greg is infallible by any means, but I think that all of those words were there if you bothered to really dig in. It's just, it's been definitely it's been run with by zealots. And a zealot is someone, in my mind, who, and I think that's the difference for me, is, like, people who are zealot, they don't look to see where it could improve. And they're just taking the word of the leader as though it's like the
gospel. It's like a cult. So, I mean, that was kind of, and then the other issue was, and a completely different one. Like, I never, the definition of fitness was self-serving for the training system, right? And, so, like, that makes sense. But for me, I was in a completely different realm where we were trying to train athletes to be better performers on the field. And so there were limitations within the way that people were selecting their movements. But I came in and said, hey, if you want to make this better, here's ways to improve upon this. And so, I crafted my own definition of athleticism. Yeah. For athletes or people that want to do athletic endeavors. Do I feel that athletic movement is kind of like the pretty girl in the room? 100%. Like, and you guys have seen this. People come into the CrossFit gym and they move pretty well, and they move differently than other people. And you're like, oh, you're pretty good at this. Did you do something beforehand? Yeah, I was ran track in college. I was a gymnast. Like, they have some athletic background leading into it that makes it a little bit more visually appealing. They just tend to do things a little bit easier. So, like, that piece was always fascinating to me. And, like, because I would have people come in and they would come do our seminar and they couldn't do anything. And I would always ask them, I'd be like, and they had never been exposed to anything that looked like, I didn't really play sports. I've never done any athletic training. I've just done CrossFit. And so I was like, well, you have to understand that there's a difference between fitness and athleticism. Yeah. And that was what I was trying to also get into that podcast, that, like, I was trying to make people more athletic, better versions of themselves. And that fitness is in that component. So that's kind of what we discussed. And then obviously, Hiller and Saban and all those guys jumped into it. And I'm like, I wasn't even trying to bring this argument with this fight against these guys. I just was trying to basically give a little bit of historical perspective. I mean, when you go teach as many seminars, I mean, Pat, you taught a shit ton of seminars too. I mean, I was on the road for 9 years teaching seminars. I mean, when you coach thousands of athletes in real time, you start finding patterns. And that was what I was discussing with the patterns.
For sure. And those guys are zealots. I mean, and they're also open with their desire to create conflict. It's how you get clicks. It's how you do those things. And I've actually appreciated that with Hiller's stuff, because he's like, I'm trying to get clicks. That's what I'm trying to do.
Think he's hilarious. So, I think he's really funny. And I think the Taylor mid-self guy, like, I think they're hilarious. I even hit them up and I was like, dude, you guys are really funny. Like, these memes, like, I have a pretty good sense of humor, and I appreciate other senses of humor. And I'm like, dude, this is hilarious to me. What I kind of got a little turned off by, where it got like super cunty and people were like taking these sides and this, and I was like, this is just working out, right? Like, this is just about training.
Either side of it,
So I was like, let's take this with a grain of salt, dude. Like, we're not going to war. Like, nobody's dying here. You're talking about two different methodologies and two different approaches that have different applications. And to say one is better than the other, I mean, it's based upon usage. When I started training, Victor and Philippe and Shanji and the jiu-jitsu guys, one of the things that was glaring was their aerobic capacity was atrocious. For guys that would go out and roll, like we got on and just did some simple stuff on the bike and they just wilted. So I realized, looking at their heart rate zones, and more importantly, started tracking, went with Joel Jamison's Morpheus to kind of see what kind of zones and what they were doing. And I realized that they were so efficient in their jiu-jitsu game that their heart rate never really got very high when they were doing jits. And I was like, well, this is a huge problem, right? They had never done a standard strength conditioning template, right? They didn't do any really high intensity stuff. So like a mix of like Tabata air bike sprints with the Echo and, lifting heavy weights and doing a little bit of change of direction and a little bit of movement was like massively impactful for them. And then, making sure that they were fit enough and strong enough based upon our model, and then allowed them to be able to go train with more volume. So now instead of getting 10 sessions, they were getting 14 sessions on the mat. And it was a very simple thing. Did they need to get stronger? Yeah. Did they need to improve their fitness? Yeah. Did they need to train some under energy systems? Yeah. Did they need to do jujitsu? Yeah. It's not like I was put them in and it's like, all right, 21, 15, 9, constantly varied movements performed at high intensity. Like they were individual athletes that we assessed. I saw weaknesses within what they were doing and basically filled the holes and allowed them to be really good. But that is a coach working with an individual with an intended outcome. That's not me just prescribing something to the masses, which we do some, for training in that way. But, where I really am pretty good is working with people and working with athletes and figuring out where the holes are and then helping them backfill. We still have a contract with Naval Special Warfare and go work with Development Group, SEAL Team 6 guys, and we go in and teach seminars for them and figure out, where the lug nuts are loose and help them tighten it up and help war fighters in that way. So, and professional athletes and other people. So it's more of a specific population. Like I'm not just trying to bring in, Susie off the street who's a mom that wants to push her stroller and get her super fit. Like that's not the market for me. And there's a great market and CrossFit does an incredible job for that.
Yeah, and I think that's the big difference, right? Is that's the market for CrossFit. That's what we're doing in our affiliates is I want Susie in my gym so I can do that. And that clearly is not what you're after. And it's, as you described, like looking for the loose nuts, it's like, that's what is described at the level 1 when we talk about the Hopper model. It's like every athlete has some sort of deficiency. And when you find that through a training program that provides some variance, and then you improve upon that, that gives them more capacity to go back and do their sport and do their thing, which I think is your point of like, hey, we want to find where the weakness is. And then,
Yeah, my brothers go to Ryan Fisher's Chalk Gym in Newport Beach, and they still CrossFit at 6 a.m. and lift weights, and allows them to go, do anything they want. My brother plays tennis. My other brother, they go, skiing and snowboarding, and allows them to stay pretty fit and like look pretty good when they go on vacation, and they get to lift weights and have fun, and they do it as a community. And both my brothers still go to that CrossFit gym. I don't know if it's a CrossFit anymore. I think it's like Chalk Fitness, but it's CrossFit. So, and it's the perfect situation for them. And I'm always stoked with them. I see them like, you guys having fun? They're like, yeah, all of our boys go. We have a great time. We get to go and, have a beer, and there's a bunch of fit people there, and we love it. I'm like, dude, that's great. That's exactly what you should be doing. You should be having fun with this stuff.
Right. It's going to motivate you to come back and do it more.
If you were to examine, because I think there's sport specific training in GPP. If you were to look at the GPP that CrossFit does, which is constantly varied functional movements executed high intensity, with an effort to increase fitness. And that's our entire focus, right? If you were to look at that and say on average, what you see people doing with regards to that, is there something that you would add or subtract to it that you think would make it better for the average person?
The definition of athleticism that we crafted through many CrossFit football seminars and Power Athlete was the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly combine primal movement patterns through space to accomplish a known or novel task. And so the body can
essentially, right?
It's basically athletic problem solving, right? So the lower body can only do 3 things, right? You can X-axis. So if you go X, Y, and Z on a 3 axes of rotation. The X-axis is a hinge with the hips, right? If you draw a steel spike through the hips, goes this way, it hinges, right? If you go this way straight up and it pivots, it's a step. If you come straight through in a Z, it's actually a step up with like the changing the iliac crest. So there's only really three things my lower body can do. I can do an X, Y, and a Z. And what we understand as athleticism is the seamless ability to combine X, Y, and Z axis through space to accomplish a known or novel task. So like think about like a linebacker, right? He like sits back into a universal athletic position into a hinge. He takes a step into Y. The guy comes at him, he hurdles him into an X or into a Z, and then he breaks down into an X, takes a step, and makes a tackle. So when you look at people move through space with their lower body, that's just a combination of X, Y, and Z axis and how they bring that together. So what we started, or my theory was, if I understand that there's a combination of X, Y, and Z axis, I can teach X, I can teach Y, and I can teach Z, and then I can put them together and hopefully have them work back together and, and make them proficient at this. So I would just make sure that people have those three. And then for the upper body, it's a push and a pull and a push and a pull. So, obviously there's things out on the periphery, but those are kind of a combination. So there's really only 7 primal movements now, but you can talk about standing up, you can talk about supine, prone, which is what was fascinating with the jiu-jitsu guys, in that I always pictured athleticism from a standing model, right? Kind of like a football player or baseball or, whatever. So when the jits guys came, my theory was I never thought about it in terms of a gyroscope, like here they are moving in different ways. And so what we found was that there was application towards athleticism in terms of the movement. If they're playing on their back, they're playing guard. It was just a combination of those. And just being able to kind of make them efficient and stronger played massive dividends. So I would ask people to not only be strong in these different planes of motion, because what I observed with CrossFit was just a lot of bilateral hip hinging in a sagittal plane. So there's frontal, transverse. So I'd make sure to be X, Y, and Z axis for upper bodies, transverse, frontal, and sagittal. And I would just basically design the programming to be able to stress these different aspects of what I understand athleticism. So instead of just asking people to do thruster, pull up, and clean, like there's different ways to try to transition. There's plyometrics, there's movement, there's kettlebells, there's swings. So, but you have to remember that comes down to the creativity of the coach writing the programming. And 17 years ago when I came, like this is what I saw. And so I think what's been good is that now through the internet and CrossFit football and you guys and everybody growing as coaches, I think a lot of this has really kind of fixed itself to make hopefully people are better, more athletic beings. And then the last piece is use your fitness for something. A lot of people just, and my brothers are guilty of this too. They like CrossFit, but my brother goes and plays his tennis. And I asked him, I'm like, do you feel that the CrossFit makes you better at tennis? He's like, I'm more fit so I can play at a higher level, but I feel that my CrossFit improves when I do play tennis because there's a lot of lateral movement in certain things. Yeah. But I don't necessarily see that in the CrossFit or within his training space. And I was like, okay, so is there a way that we can improve the training space to incorporate some of these movements and just some of these patterns? And he's like, yeah, I think we could, but that would force the coach to grow a little bit. And then one of the other issues is just making sure, and that was the one part that I feel like people completely forgot about Greg's model, was go out and practice and learn new sports regularly. Like I think you were a volleyball player from what I remember, if my memory serves me correct.
Still
right,
play,
Paul?
bro. I'm playing in tournaments. Got my AA last season. Lost it this season.
Yeah, and what's wild is when I saw you move and you were pretty athletic and you moved, and when you told me you played volleyball, I was like, that makes total sense, right? It means you were able, like you were good jumping off of one leg, cross patterning. You could hit, you could get into this position. You could like a lot of the movement that you did within the volleyball space allows you to foster and develop athleticism, and then all the other stuff. But it's not as if like one was better than the other. They work in concert together.
Yeah, and I feel like it kind of goes back to what you were saying with your kids of not having them isolate and just play the one sport. It's like play more things, get adaptations from different things, use fitness as a tool to allow you to do that better. I think that the problem lies in when all we do is fitness or all we do is these one things without the opportunity to try different stuff.
Yeah. And that's where I 100%. And that's what I used to tell people. I'm like, go outside and test it. Like, I mean, this thing only works is if you're able to go out and use it in fun and interesting ways, and then come back, tell me. And if it doesn't meet your demand, then we'll change the stimulus. I mean, the SAID principle, specific adaptation to impose demands, like that's reverse engineering. Like you tell me the demand, if it didn't meet it, we'll work back on the other way and we'll figure out something better to make you, we're malleable in that way.
Yeah, and I think that with the limited time that we have with most quote unquote, members. I mean, I think it's pedantic, but the difference between an athlete and a member is like most of these people are they're IT programmers who walk into your gym and they're like, I want to live a higher quality life, and it's like I'm gonna probably at max have 4 days a week with you. Like, where am I going to get the most bang for my buck? I would argue that we are doing that quite well in terms of going and living a high quality life, and that if there is the opportunity to based off of what you were just saying there, to elevate that even further is to look more specifically at what you want to achieve with your life, and then be like, hey, you've got the base level of fitness for that. Now let's talk about some specific movement patterns for that we could maximize, and let's see if we can spend a little bit of time in the gym training to do so. If I could understand what you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, I like I always think it's funny. I think people take shots at it's my dog. If you can see him, he's there he is.
Good buddy.
Yeah,
what is that?
He's a pit bull.
Pit.
Yeah, I've only ever owned pit bulls, which is funny. I remember when I went first to Greg and Lauren's house, they were like, "Oh, all we has pit bulls," and I was like, "Well, I've only owned pit bulls, so you guys must be pretty good in that way." But it's always interesting to me where people take shots in CrossFit. I worked with CrossFitters. I trained within, we taught seminars. I worked within that market. I competed in the CrossFit Games. I went to a level 1 organically. I wasn't invited. I just showed up. And so whenever people kind of take shots, it always feels very like outside, kind of like a fan shouting from, the bleachers. And, and any of the stuff that I've ever, talked about in terms of this is just basically like understanding the nuance, what people are doing, and trying to offer like, hey, I'm not saying this is bad. I'm not trying to attack people, because at the end of the day, they're doing something which is better than nothing. And I think there's worse things they could be doing. Like, I always feel bad for people. Like, I have a bunch of friends that do a bunch of endurance stuff, and they just sit on a bike, and I'm like, that's great. I'm happy you sit on a bike, but like, you got to lift some weights too. And like, you got to do some other things that just riding straight ahead. But I mean, that's what they love to do.
Well, but even how you phrase that, there's worse things they could be doing. In my mind, I go, tell me a better general thing than that exists. Cause like you could call me a zealot, but like the phrasing that you have there would quote unquote trigger someone who's like, I believe in this because of its impact on the people that I see day in and day out work with. So like, I want to know because your phrasing there is I don't think it's intentional, but it is antagonistic towards it not being great, but it's better than nothing. Because I say that.
Well, no,
I say that about. Right?
I wasn't trying to say it in like a way that was like demeaning. But like, for example, like, I'll just give you an example. We,
Sure.
years ago when we were at Newport Beach, we had all these yoga people like wanted to come train with us. They were like, hey, let's swap out. You can come do yoga and we'll come lift weights. And they were, all they talked about was how great yoga was and how everybody just needs to do yoga on this. And so they show up and we go to lift weights. They had zero ability to have any active range of motion. They couldn't squat with a bar on their back. They looked, the proverbial dog shitting a razor blade. They couldn't do any form of active range of motion. All they could do was passive range of motion. And then as I started getting into like all of their like hip issues, and they all like had hip replacements and all these joint replacements and these things. And I was like, and like, as we got into strength training, this was like a huge problem for them. They're like, why can't I squat a 45-pound bar? I can sit in this position and do all these different poses. And I was like, if I was you, I would stop doing yoga and I would lift weights. I think you'll feel a lot better. And we had people that literally just started lifting weights, and like, there was a miraculous recovery. And the yoga people got pissed at us because we went and did their yoga. And like, I did it 1 or 2 days a week, and I think I felt better. But at the end of the day, they're like, oh, you should come more. I'm like, no, 1 or 2 days a week is more than enough for me. Yeah, it was more than that. And like, we ended up kind of converting and stealing these people out of a burning building that were just getting fucking trashed by yoga. So is yoga bad? No. But is anything like, I think that there is a constantly varied. I think you need to expose yourself to different stuff. And I think what I'm saying when I say that is that there's people that 2 on, 1 off. So they go 6 days a week and all they do is CrossFit in the WOD, and that's enough. And I don't think that's enough. I think you have to do, and this isn't, I mean, but this isn't the methodology. How somebody interprets at their gym is very different than how I would write it in this. And so, I mean, we used to, as you know, you travel and you see a lot of gyms. There were some that were really dope programming and people were really switched on. There were other people that I was like, you should fucking give these people their money back. And I think like that's the hard part with the way, Greg's kind of free market and give affiliations in this and let anybody do anything. I mean, there was I remember it was funny. There was a gym I think it was in Spain that was doing Zumba and put CrossFit on it. And they were just selling Zumba classes.
Yeah.
And like, was it constantly varied? Yeah, I guess they were doing different steps. But like, that's kind of where I say, like, it's better than nothing. Like, it is the worst application of CrossFit better than doing nothing? Like, that's kind of what I was trying to get to. I wasn't talking about the best of the best. I was talking about the worst. But I do think there's some sharp people. I mean, a lot of good stuff has come out. And like I said, the fact that I can drive by and see people working out in their garage because of Rogue and all the stuff that happened. I mean, pre-CrossFit, like that didn't exist. I remember when I had weights in my downstairs and we lifted weights, I had the fucking neighbors calling the police on us. And like, these people are in there doing stuff with heavy things. We don't like this. Yeah. Now it's like, I drive by, like I take my kids, we live on kind of a piece of property, but my kids have friends that are in these neighborhoods. Dude, you drive by, everybody has some form of little micro gym, has something in their garage. Like they're in there doing stuff, which is like, that would not have existed before CrossFit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the training landscape has changed 100% from 2001 to now. Like the elite training landscape is not similar, but it's like it existed. I mean, you were exposed to it and you saw like, but even on that podcast, when you were talking about it, it's like the only place you knew that people trained like this was like real weight rooms at college facilities and professional sports and things like that. And now it's like an everyday known, and there's hundreds of copycats. And like, I think in general, the quality of human being that exists now, who can approach and find a level of fitness that's was previously untouched from most people. I mean, when we think about the whole thing, is like, I always sit around and pontificate on the fact that exercise in general is made up. It's like the whole thing is fabricated stress so that we don't become giant pieces of shit because we no longer have to use our bodies for anything. So the entire thing's a made up scenario. So the fact that we're sitting around having a dick measuring contest around what's the best is hilarious to me, because this is all made up. Like we're literally doing this as a made up experiment.
No, I do. Dude, the fact that we have to go and force exercise, which is something that we should have inherently been doing in our survival. I was actually out in California earlier this week, and we went and met with a gal, a lady named Sabine Hazen, who's a doctor. She's like one of the top gut. I mean, she's like the gut biome researcher. She's the one that pioneered all the fecal transplants. So I went and met with her, had her on the podcast, and so we drove up to LA to go meet with her. But it was kind of funny. Like, she uses everything in an evolutionary model. We were talking about like how obesity affects the gut biome, and she's like, it affects men, seems to be more than women. She goes, but that would make sense. When would you have seen a fat hunter and gatherer? She's like, you might have seen women that were a little overweight or maybe a little heavy or a little softer for the mere fact that they were like rearing children in this situation. But she's like, when would you ever seen a fat man in a hunter-gatherer? She's like, that guy would have fucking not been able to run, or he would have been killed and eaten quicker. So she was talking about how obesity is really affecting the gut biome, and our perception of what's fit and what's obese and what is completely off. So it's just interesting that she still uses this evolutionary model, which is interesting because Art Devaney wrote that evolutionary fitness, which I think was some of the early stuff that really influenced Greg and Rob Wolf and those guys. And like, if you read Art's stuff, it really fits within that evolutionary model. And I think for science and all this, like, it's forced adaptation. Like, what are we trying to evolve? I'm like 6'6", 270 pounds. I played it like, 310 pounds. Like I evolved to be able to do my job, which is play football. Is that necessarily a healthy kind of like, hey, I'm going to go through my life? Like, no, it's extremely fucking inefficient. I got to eat a lot. Like, I mean, if famine comes, I'm going to be the first one that goes,
Right. I think it's funny how we've kind of worked our way back here, but that's kind of goes back to when I, at the very beginning, was like, I hate Paul Saladino. It's not that I think Paul has some great concepts, and I just here's the deal. He's been like, literally, he's been a hardcore vegan, a hardcore paleo, a hardcore meat only, and now he's on to his meat and fruit. And every time he's doing one thing, he's like, this is the greatest. this is the greatest, and there is no other things. And you're like, holy shit, dude.
Well,
come on.
he's a crazy person. But I'll tell you the reason, and this is actually pretty fascinating, and this is something I observed with the Brazilians. So the Brazilians that I train are all from like North Brazil, which is like, Florianopolis not Florianopolis, down south, Fortaleza and like San Luis in this. So when the guys are in Brazil, they can eat probably 600 to 900 grams of carbohydrates a day. The majority of their food comes from like beans and rice, and they eat a very high carb diet. And everybody's there is pretty lean. They all come to America and they try to eat that same diet. And all of a sudden they were all getting like pretty lunchy, and we had to change their diets. I think Paul saw the exact same thing. So there's a direct relationship between vitamin D exposure and carbohydrates. So if you look at all the hunter-gatherer tribes, like the Hadza, for example, that are down in Africa around the equator, they eat a ton of carb. But then you go out to like the Inuit and like the people in the north, they eat almost no carbohydrate. So there's a relationship between carbohydrate consumption and vitamin D that we observed. And so when the Brazilians come here, if they eat the same diet, they tend to get kind of soft and kind of lunchy. So I had to cut all their carbs back and kind of put them on a more of a high protein diet. And they all ended up they all were fine. And their question is like, why in Brazil can I eat carbs and not get fat? And I'm like, when I come to America, and people are going to blame, it's big sugar, it's big vegetable, it's big bread, it's like all these, everybody's got this scam. And I think what happened to Paul is he was got on this carnivore diet, and then all of a sudden went down to Costa Rica and realized that now he's into a lot more sun exposure, and he was probably fucking dying and realizing like, holy shit, I'm getting all this sun exposure. Now I got to eat some carbohydrates. And so I think him going and adding fruit and honey was more of an adaptation of his environment that he moved to, more so than that. So he's just he's probably adjusting. At least that's the way that I understand it. And that was a pretty interesting play. And that was actually confirmed when I was meeting with Dr. Sabine, and she's like, here's how vitamin D affects the gut and your microbiome. And she's like, if these guys vitamin D, because when I tested Brazilians, their vitamin D levels were like 18. So I had to dose them with high amounts of vitamin D to try to get them up to 70 or 80, to the point where they thought I was giving them performance enhancing drugs. They were like, I feel so much better. This is amazing. So I think Paul's a massive bullshitter, and he's a big, he's got he has an intended outcome to be able to sell supplements.
Sure.
So, but he also looks like a fucking, like a rotisserie chicken, which I think is not a good look. So that's why
Todd has a shrine to him at his house. And,
something like that.
Follows.
So he does. He kind of looks like a rotisserie chicken.
Yeah, I can see that.
So
Todd, do you get a lot of D there in Florida?
Am I in the sunshine? Yes, I try to get outside. Yeah. Not as much as I'd like, but anyways.
But it's true. I mean, think about like from that evolutionary deal. I mean, the majority of light that we're getting is this artificial. I mean, how much direct sunshine are we really getting? It's just right. I like but like when I asked the guys in Brazil, and they were like, there's no AC in the house, so when it's hot, you're outside, you're moving around. Like there's. Right. Like they're just sun exposure, and how much they are outside is just so much bigger. I mean, they're at the beach or at different places. Whereas I feel like, we're probably 98% less sun exposure than we had evolutionary. And I'm not a huge, I think the worst thing to happen to paleo was a bunch of weirdos in loincloths doing a bunch of weird stuff. But I definitely think that Art Devaney's kind of evolutionary fitness and a lot of some of his evolutionary model stuff makes a lot of sense when you look at it from the perspective.
Yeah. Who is the best coach you ever had? If you had to look back on all the coaches you ever had, who was the one that you were just like, that was the best coach? And tell me why.
Rafael Ruiz. So what Rafael Ruiz was Rafael had this amazing way of one-upping you at every turn. So like I thought I did something good, and then he would just do something that kind of just absolutely blew my mind. So he would train with us. So I always had this mind, coach was usually the dude in shorts yelling at me when I was working hard. So I had a kind of a negative association with the term coach. When I started training with Roth would train with us, and he would absolutely blow my mind. And that was pretty amazing to me. And that he also had this really amazing ability to have you execute things that you didn't think were possible because he believed in you. If Rafael believed I could do something, regardless of whether or not I believed in myself, I knew I could do it because he would never put me in that situation. And I trained with him for the majority of my NFL career. And then we started teaching CrossFit football. I brought him out with me. And I still count him as probably the best coach I've ever had, probably one of the best strength coaches I've ever been exposed to. I had some really good strength coaches, but they were incredibly knowledgeable. But I did not always feel that they believed in me more than I believed in myself. And I had people that I succeeded in spite of, just because like that's kind of how I'm wired up. But Rolf is hands down the best I've ever seen, and probably one of the most talented, most knowledgeable people I've ever been exposed to.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
I love that.
Playing offensive line is a very, very specific skill set, and there's a lot of really interesting pieces, but the person has to have a lot of the like genetic makeup and the understanding. So like bringing in Will Fries, who was already a starter, and being able to go and clean all of his movement up and teach him all these little nuances was like extremely like well within my skill set. Like I can take somebody who's good and make them better. But then like, teaching the basics, if somebody doesn't have like the basic level of athleticism to kind of understand what I'm doing, like I'm never going to be able to take somebody on that journey. Like, like I feel like Rolf's the type of guy who could like take somebody who knew nothing and take them here. I'm pretty good. If you're pretty good, I can make you sharper. Like if your blade's already sharp, whereas I feel like Rolf's the guy, like, finding like an old piece of like iron in the garden and hammering it into this blade. So I've always kind of tended to work with people that were a little farther down the food chain. Whereas I've always been very respectful and very observant of people that could take somebody that was completely unadapted, like the least fittest person, and be able to take them on that journey. And I always felt that was impressive.
You've been doing some blacksmithing?
Yeah.
Did I hear you say same?
I weld and fabricate, so I build trucks. Nice. I build a bunch of like crazy off-road trucks and weld and build stuff and build all this stuff on our property. And so, I'm friends with Neil Kamamura from, who is, So Neil's a good friend of mine, and and makes dope knives in Hawaii. So like one of my bucket list items is to go visit Neil, forge a knife, and then go kill, or a spear, and go kill a pig with it and then cook it in the ground, Kahlua style. But I've done a little bit of forging. I really like, I TIG and I MIG, and I picked up stick welding this year to build a cover for our sauna. But like I live on a ranch, and so like gates and everything, like I've built everything. So it's a really valuable skill set.
Yeah, I've been getting into it for I have 5 acres here in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So and I've just been doing constant building, and it started with forging actually, and blacksmithing. I got a farrier's forge off Craigslist, and then just started doing it off of, Forge and Fire, watching Neil's old episodes and doing that, and working with angle grinders, and got my 2x72, and then finally got like a little wire feed welder, and I'm like, this is great. And I tried to do stick welding, and that was quite sticky at the time, but it's been fun, man. It's you got to come. I mean, how often do you come into Cali?
Well, we were just out there to go see Dr. Sabine, and then I went and met a guy named Bobby Williams, who has a technology called Stratosphere. So he's up in the Palisades, kind of Malibu. What he did is he created these altitude chambers that you work out in, and what it does is it goes kind of, they bounce it around.
Dragon Ball Z shit.
Sea level to 6, 4 to 10, and it kind of like every 2 minutes it gives you a different altitude up to 20,000. And so I jumped in his machine, and we did that altitude, and he does workouts in there, and it's there's some insane gene expression deal that he I got to get plugged in with his scientist to kind of understand it a little bit more. But he's got these crazy machines, so we went up there. I'm going to have him on the podcast, so I wanted to meet him and kind of see his space and kind of see these units, because he was explaining it to me. I was like, man, like, so we had a guy named Dr. Joe DeRudy, who's the Navy's expert on hyperbaric chambers, on the podcast. And so I went through the 40 sessions that he recommended on the hyperbarics, which takes you down to 2.2 atmospheres, I think is what I did. But you're in this metal tube, and it's not only the oxygen, but it's also the pressure, because at 2 atmospheres, your body doesn't need hemoglobin to move oxygen. It just absorbs into the plasma, so you can oxygenate different parts of your body. So it actually has a pretty neat like life extension component to it. So I did that. And when this guy got introduced to me, I was like, oh, like, how does that affect? And so I kind of wanted to see it in relationship to what I've seen with the hyperbarics. So it's fascinating to see what people are doing in terms of ramping up human performance.
I think you're the perfect person to do that, though, because you're all in sport specific and taking the top people and making them better, right?
Yeah.
I think the thing that gets really missed for me is like all these people like the Hubermans and the Tim Ferriss and the people who are very, or even the like Peter Attia. I'd say he's a little bit more general, but it's like they're so nuanced and not nuanced. They're working on such a micro level, and the people listen to this stuff and they're like, that's what I got to do. Or even the Paul Saladinos, there's like, that's what I got to do. And it's like, dude, the vast majority of humans are not even close to necessitating something like this.
To optimize.
You need to be remotely active.
Work out some, go outside, eat real food and not shit, and then worry about
that's like called the low-hanging fruit. Like what's the low-hanging fruit? Like, let's give you an example. So we had Joel Jameson on the podcast. So he sent us their Morpheus devices, and when I do my recovery thing, I think I need like 150 to 160 minutes a week of his recovery, which for me is like 105 to like 149 beats. So I get on the Echo and I ride for 30, 35 minutes every morning, and I get my 50 to 160 minutes, and then I lift weights. You know, we do kind of like an every other day kind of full body with the jits guys, and then I go to jiu-jitsu. It's pretty noticeable when I don't do my recovery work that I can like track it with all my sleep stuff. I see what my HRV is, my breaths at night, like what my resting heart rate is, and I track all my sleep through that 8 sleep. And it's fucking night and day. Like, and I go to jits and I'm like way more lucid. Like I'm just so much better on the recovery stuff. Like if I miss a day lifting weights, like at for the amount of time I've been lifting weights, like my level of exposure is so high that like the dose of like somewhere between every 3 to 5 days, I got to lift something heavy kind of works. So if I train every other day and I miss a day, I don't like, oh fuck, I got to go. I'll just pick it up on the next one. And I go in and I'm still relatively strong. So like the dose related to keep my strength and my neurological efficiency up is like maybe once every 3 to 5 days. So I don't really have to lift weights like I did. But I know that like the zone 2 stuff builds mitochondrial density. And if I lose that, then I start having other issues that I can see in all these other places. I also think that like when I go to jiu-jitsu, the athletic problem solving piece and the movement and just some of the things that we do within the warm up and just even within the training are really good for me just neurologically. So like that's a kind of complete change in me. But for a lot of people, I mean, there's just really low-hanging fruit. Like, are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you getting outside? Are you exercising? Are you, like living an active, healthy lifestyle? The one thing and this is what I was meeting with Dr. Sabine about, was pretty fascinating, is, you run into a lot of people who their perception of like body fat, like, oh, I'm only a few pounds away from being 10%. I'm like, dude, you're a lot farther than that. And seeing like, we have a lot of people, especially with like, asking questions on hormone replacement, and I have all these issues. And like, I'm always like, man, if you could just be leaner, a lot of this stuff would fix itself. So how do you, drop body fat? Like, what does that look like? You're going to have to eat in caloric restriction, high protein diet. You're going to have to get some zone 2, lift some weights. And it's pretty interesting just seeing how, like, if they can do that, how everything kind of fixes itself. So I think there is some low hanging fruit, but I think what, for the podcast and the things that I get kind of geeked out on, it is tip of the spear. But like, how many people does that apply? Like 4? Yeah, but like at the end of the day, it's kind of fun to go out and see this.
Super
like,
fun.
This guy's got this $1 million chamber, and he's going to sell them to the UFC, and they're going to use them in fighters. I train these, jiu-jitsu guys for the UFC Fight Pass stuff. So like, there's maybe an application. So I can see like what it is, and I want to hear it. But like, does the normal person need to go work out in the altitude chamber? Fuck no. Right? Would they be better with spending $500 to have an Echo bike in their living room that every time they walk by it, they hit 25 or 50 calories? 100%. Like, like, are they going to do better by just eating a little more protein and maybe a little less processed food? 100%. So I think the issue becomes, and for Huberman and all these guys, like, they need to sell clicks, and the more fantastic it is, the more people get excited. But most people don't really need it.
Yeah. You can't just keep putting out the same simple stuff every time, because people will stop listening, right? You need something new and exciting. And actually it's this many minutes in your cold plunge each day.
The cold plunge thing's interesting.
Well,
I like it.
I think that
it makes me feel amazing, and my energy and all of that kind of stuff.
Dude, so we did. We had the guy from Ice Barrel come on the podcast, and he sent us a unit, and he's like, "Hey, you should do an ice bath for 30 days in a row." And I was like, "All right, how heavy?" Or like, what's the like, what's the deal? He's like, oh, like 39 to 40 degrees. So I would get in for like 5 minutes every morning, first thing in the morning when I woke up. I will tell you, the neurological and just like my well-being throughout the day was so fucking good, to the point where I was reading these people that are like, oh, it's not good for you and this. And I'm like, dude, like, to the point where I drink coffee in the morning, as I know you do, Pat, but like, I would do the ice bath and I would like save my coffee until like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, opposed from like coming in and like hitting it at 9 o'clock. It was almost like it was as good as drinking a coffee. I felt so lucid and just fucking switched on from this thing that when people are like, oh, it's bad to do it too much, I'm like, I'm not buying it.
Well, I think that's the whole thing, is like you're like, don't do it after a workout and all of these different things. And it's like, hey, I do it because it makes me feel good. I like the energy. Like, is there a perfect number of minutes? Am I going to ruin it if I do too many, or am I going to not get the benefits if I do too few? It's like, I don't care. I do it because it makes me feel good. And that's it. I'm going to do it when I can, right?
They were like, no more than 2 minutes. And I'm like, well, dude, I'm like, have you ever tried to defrost a thick steak? Like, I was like, 2 minutes. I'm like a thick steak, dude. I need like 5 minutes. So when they're like, oh, no more than 2, I'm like a fucking 2-inch steak, dude. It's going to take me 5 minutes. But yeah, I got in that thing. I absolutely love it. Dude, I love the sauna. Like, you know, we get in the hot, like, I think the sauna, like the research from the sauna from Finland is like, if you can get in that thing for like, you know, 40 to 70 minutes a week, like your chance of heart attack goes to zero. Like these things are, I think they're good. I mean, I like to think of them as low hanging fruit, but I also, the way that I classify, and I consult for a local billionaire here who, you know, help him with his fitness, and he's really into all these different technologies. And the way that I break all this technology and all the shit that he buys is into passive and active. You need to have like a certain amount of passive, like sitting in a sauna, sitting in an ice bath, red light, all these things are what I call like passive modalities. You need to be able to do active modalities, which is like lifting weights, walking, or zone 2, some movement, sport, like whatever. And you need to balance both of those. And what I found for a lot of like the Huberman crowd is they're just looking to stack more passive things, you know, and they just want to do more passive things. Oh, it's red light. It's this, it's this, it's this. And what I liked about Bobby's machine is, you know, we're going to use all these different altitudes, but I want you to work out at the same time. And like, to me, that was kind of interesting, where now you're taking a modality and you're making an active modality. So as you kind of look at a lot of these, like, I feel that people keep stacking passive modalities more so than active. And you got to have a good balance. So yeah, my client is like a king of like passive modalities. Oh, I'm going to get this laser. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And I'm like, fuck, dude, at some point you got to get your heart rate up, or this thing isn't going to work, dude. All this shit isn't going to do anything.
Right.
I think passive modality is the American way, isn't it? Isn't that the entire most recent development of technology was about being as passive as possible? And look, it's led us to a great place where everyone's doing good. JK,
I disagree.
LOL. I was joking.
Oh no,
dying. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
No, I completely agree. So, you know, COVID was interesting.
No, COVID was great. It was such a fun time. I enjoyed the hell out of it.
No, yeah, well, okay, maybe it was good, but like it was really fascinating for the fact that like it really showed kind of like people's true colors. You know, like I was really kind of you know, like just amazed at like, one, how willing people were to just kind of abandon everything. Like one of the fascinating things was like COVID hit, everybody wanted to build a garage gym. And like, you know, that was like a huge thing. People were buying weights and trying, you know, I got to train. The minute that COVID ended, lockdown, everybody sold all their shit.
Right.
And I like, it blew my fucking mind. I was like, you guys had freedom to be able to go lift. I have a building up here that I train at, you know, like it's about 200 feet from my house and it's right on the hill. And I go up there and I do something every single day, even if it's just, you know, rotation, a little bit of trunk work and some GHDs and a little bit of movement stuff. I go train like and do something every day. And people are like, oh, that blew my mind. I'm like, why are you guys selling your stuff? Oh, well, COVID lockdown. I'm gonna go back to the gym. I'm like, I would never go to a commercial gym again. And if I do, like whenever we go to a commercial gym, one, I'm completely amazed by all the mirrors. Like it's the most, like it throws me off where I'm like, God, you can see everybody from, this is so fucking strange. But then you also kind of observe that people are just doing fuck all. And it's just really, Yeah, we're in interesting times. We're in interesting times. I feel very blessed to live on a piece of land and be able to have created the life that I want, and I get to work with athletes and the people that I do. I'm glad that I don't really have to kind of like navigate kind of the general public in terms of, you know, a lot of this stuff. But I do see it on social media. I just feel bad for it.
Do you know what my vision is? And here's my, like, kind of going back to what you were talking about. You know, you thought that the intelligence would increase around the world, or non-ignorance would increase around the world as soon as we had access to all the information. Here's my kind of dream and hypothesis for what's going to happen in the next little bit. Is I think that because of the amount of information, like there's such an oversaturation or over volume, and you can find data and evidence and videos and sound bites to support any ideology that you want. And with the rise of AI and things being just straight up fake and just not real, I think eventually everyone's going to realize that nothing's real, and they're going to have to do a coupling of things, right? Where they're going to have to find a piece of information that they think might support something that they want to achieve outcome wise, and then have to do the research to find what actually is real, and then speak to the people in their lives that will then be like, hey, what do you know about this? And so you'll have to confirm it from so many places to where you'll get much more concrete evidence, then pursue those. So my dream is that people will realize that everything's fake, to where they don't trust anything, to where they go back to relying on what they actually experience, and then simultaneously coupled with that have access to unlimited information. And I think those two together would be like, oh, you'd actually get some movement forward in the, in our general psychological understandings or understandings of the world.
Pat, the other one is a little different too. Like, for example, if I came and visited you at your deal, and I showed up and I was like, what do you need to get done? You're like, well, I need to build this. I'm like, you got a track loader, you got a skid steer, I can do dirt work, I can weld, I can do anything. And then you show up and you're like, hey, can you help me with this? Do you need me to teach you to TIG, MIG? Like, I can teach you to stick weld. You want to, 70-18, what do you got? Like, that's it. Like that type of shit to me is valuable. And it's pretty funny because I've had people come over. They're always like, man, I can't believe you can do all this stuff. I'm like, well, there was a point at which I couldn't. And you basically like have to learn it. And they're like, well, how did you learn it? I'm like, I was really shitty for a long time. Yep. And then all of a sudden I wasn't, because I didn't stop. Like when I welded, I became a really good grinder because I had to clean up. And now I fucking lay dimes. And the stick welding, like I'm also not very good at like going to the hitting range. Like I built a structure to cover our sauna. And like I like drew it all up, went out, and I got a stick welder, and I learned to stick weld while building that. But I also had the skill set because I could TIG and MIG, and I knew how to do it. Like I knew what the process was, and I like the first ones I ran were garbage, but I just basically cleaned it up and just kept going. And people are like, "Man, I can't believe you did it." I'm like, "Well, like I'm not afraid to fail, and I got a pretty good skill set." It's like I got a like a cat track loader, and like you can kind of see like that's all creek back there. So we've been excavating that, and I do all the dirt work. And like it's people are like, where'd you learn to do it? I'm like, I bought the machine, and I went out there and I just fucked shit up. And if I broke something, I fixed it.
That's exactly where I'm at. Like, I didn't start building till I was 30. Like I bought my first house, and I was like, I needed to put in a fence, and I got a quote for it. I think I was like $4,500, and I was like, for a fence? I was like, I'm doing that. I looked at the materials, $400, and I'm like, okay, we'll put this fence in. And so it started there, and then it was like, now I can do everything. And then the knife making, and like I've built a tiny home here. And like when you build a tiny home, you eventually figure stuff out. And they're like, how do you know how to do that? It's like YouTube. It's all there. You can watch it, you can learn, you can make the mistakes, and you go, how do you do this? And you just do it.
So I have a barn. Same thing. I have a barn, and it was unfinished, so I finished it, and I wanted to do cedar on the roof. So I had a guy come in and he quoted me $40,000 to do the cedar. I was like, okay. So I went down and I got all the planks, had a dude deliver all the planks. I planed them, and it's 3,000 square foot of cedar. It was 2 weeks on a scissor lift, and I did it. And then we ran electrical. We did everything. Like I polished the concrete. I did everything. And like people, like it's just a skill set. And I think the problem is like, and even in the car stuff, people are so nervous that they're going to make a mistake. And I'm like, if I break something, I'll fix it. And if it sucks, I'll grind it and fix it over. But you have to be willing to fail. And I think the issue comes down to, in this state in the world, nobody's afraid to fail. Nobody wants to admit that they don't know something. And because here's the deal. Now with AI, everybody's an expert. Yeah. And so what's wild is when you get into these conversations with people, and to even like, it's the social media thing with Hiller and going back and forth, these people were like chiming in, and I'm like, just not only do we write programming for thousands of people around the globe every single day, I train the guys at Development Group. I train these like professionals. I've trained with a lot of high level people, but on top of it, like I taught hundreds of seminars to thousands of people around the globe, the CrossFit community. And I traveled the world from the Arctic Circle to New Zealand like you guys did. And like I worked with these people like one-on-one every single weekend. We show up with a backpack on a Friday and teach all day Saturday, Sunday, and run to make a fucking an airport. And so like I'm not speaking from a theoretical place. This is me speaking after training tens of thousands of people in real time and training some of the best people in the world. So like, while this is an idea that everybody has the right to be heard, I agree with, but not everybody's opinion weighs the same.
Yep.
Like when it comes down, but that's what's so interesting on social media, because I have a social media account and I can chime in. My opinion matters. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, this is nonsense. I don't have to listen to you. Like you're going to voice your opinion, but I don't give it any credence, because one, I don't know who the fuck you are. You know, like in the CrossFit space, I mean, I met you at my level 1, dude. You're on like, we were in Every Second Counts. You were like, especially in the CrossFit, anybody says anything, you're like, no, I was there. We filmed the fucking documentary. Welbourn showed up at 310 pounds, did the CrossFit Games, then went to training camp a fucking week later.
Yeah.
So like at the end of the day, like, you guys can fucking cash stones from behind social media, or you can show the fuck up and do these things. Which I did. I was woefully no business showing up to the CrossFit Games, getting in shape to go play in the NFL, and showed up to get fucking murdered at Dave Castro's ranch in Aromas.
That was so fun. So much fun.
It was terrible. It was awful.
In the worst of ways. Did you, so I heard this person talking about this concept between the distance between doing something difficult but doable and doing something difficult and not doable. And so like the expectation you set versus where you're actually at, and the dissonance between those is like kind of that level of dissatisfaction. So many people say, I want to build a sauna, but they haven't built a birdhouse. And so they set this really lofty goal. And so it's not only that they're not afraid to fail, it's maybe they're willing to try, but the distance is so far that they're not going to get there. So they have to it's almost like, how do we choose those steps just outside our reach that promote difficulty, but then also at the same time are within our capacity? So like my first one is I had to build a fence, and then the fence turned into a doghouse, and the doghouse turned into a tiny home, and the tiny home turned into a flooring set, and then a bathroom, and then a remodel. And then and so it was like that you stacked them on top of each other. Like you didn't start by doing the cedar thing. You didn't start by doing all that. You start somewhere else. So I think what's interesting is like finding that balance, or finding something. I think homeownership is a good one, because there's a lot of little things that you can knock off your plate where you're like, I could pay someone to do this, or I could try to do it. And it's going to look a little shitty, and this drywall is going to be bad, and I don't know how to texture, but it'll be 5 hours of my time, but it'll eventually give me the confidence to go and build a sauna. Like I did the same thing. I couldn't afford a sauna. I got a quote for it, and it was like $11,000 for one of these barrel saunas. And then I talked to a guy who does wood felling and milling. And I was like, keep an eye out for a cedar. He felled the cedar, gave me all the wood, found a heater on Craigslist for $200. And then I built a sauna over my pool that's like an 8-foot by 6-foot sauna with a window on its side and the whole thing. Hand milled all the wood, did all tongue and groove. And it was all like a first. Like did all the insulation, watched on YouTube. But it's like that process didn't start there. It started with the doghouse, And
but I mean the same with lifting weights. I mean, like, hey, I want to bench 500 pounds. Like I got to bench 100 first and 220. So I mean, they're I think, and the other feeling is that everybody is because of social media, everybody's so far ahead of you. I see this with welders. Like, I mean, there's dudes that like all they do is weld 18 hours a day for fucking 40 years. And like, so my buddy Will is probably the best TIG welder I've ever seen. He's blind in one eye. So it's actually his lead eye. So it's his right eye. And as he welds this way, he can feel the flash on his face. And so he doesn't know, he knows by the sound and the flash. Like Lay's he's the best TIG welder I've ever seen. And I watch him weld and I'm like I set up exactly, and I'm pretty good. If I can watch somebody, I can kind of like mimic them. And it's incredible. And he just has so much time under the hood. So, I mean, there's no way to cheat that. Jiu-jitsu is the same way. It's a level of exposure. There's no way that like I'm ever going to be able to cheat the mat time without actually doing it. The same with welding and a lot of these things. And I think the problem is that everybody sees social media, and you see these kind of like high level kind of tip of the spear people, and everybody wants that. They don't realize that there's a whole maturation process that you have to follow. You have to suck for a long time. And I don't know why people are like I don't think that there's any shame in being a beginner. And I don't think that there's any shame in sucking at something. And I don't know why people shame people for not being good at stuff. This was always weird in the CrossFit deal where those guys would just attack these, people moving poorly. And I'm like, this was probably their first day. You're going to shoot a video and then fucking chastise this person? Come back and see them. Like, give me a chance to grow. And more importantly, why are you shitting on people? It's like, I've had people come over and weld and they're like, I know it looks awful. I'm like, yeah, it looks terrible. But it's not going to look terrible tomorrow. Yeah. And I've gone and welded with people and I've trained with people and they've taught me things and I've walked away and I've been better for the experience, but I'm also not trying to silo this stuff. I'm okay with showing up and not being the best. And, keep going back on the jits thing. I roll with Shanji Ibero, who's considered the Michael Jordan of jiu-jitsu. And every time I roll with him, I feel like at any moment he could absolutely fucking kill me. And when I feel like I'm in a good position, and it's he's so good with what he does. But I also have to remember, this is all he's been doing. He rolls 7 days a week and teaches classes. Has competed. I mean, he competed for 20 years. His brother was Hall of Famer and this. I mean, this is he trained with the Gracies in Hoyler Gracie and Gracie Academy in Rio. I mean, his experience in jiu-jitsu is probably a lot like mine playing pro football, where I'm on the phone talking to Charlie Francis and have exposure to this stuff. I mean, there's just kind of there's no way to recreate his existence. But what's neat is I get a chance to tap into that, and I'm like, I don't have any ego in this shit. There's no ego. Tell me how to be the best. All I want to know is how do I improve what I am working with? And then there's just a detailed, constant level of practice and my ability to kind of throw myself into any of these things and just be a white belt, but then realize that if I do this long enough, I'm going to get kind of fucking good at it. And then all of a sudden one day I don't suck anymore. But if I had never started and I never had that attitude, I wouldn't be where I am today on any of this stuff. And now I got a pretty varied skill set. If I show up at your place, I don't think there's anything you could ask me to do that I couldn't do pretty well. You were like, hey, we got to fucking do all this dirt work. Let's do that. If you want to do this, I can do all that stuff. But it's I sucked for a long time and now I don't suck.
Hell, same. I think jiu-jitsu has been really important for a lot of human beings, specifically men, in bringing yourself back to a very confronted, I am a beginner and there's nothing else I can be. And your level of skill is so much higher and you're showing it to me in a very close physical level. And I've seen a lot of people go through that transformation. I think it's why it's so addictive for a lot of people. I think I would argue that CrossFit has a similar thing. If you find yourself in a good space with people who are making it look much easier than you, and you're like, whoa, why was that so confronting to do these two things together? And you're like, what is going on here? I have such a far way to go. And if you can drop the ego a bit and just be a learner, those types of confrontations I think are really important. And so I think jiu-jitsu has been profound for many people because of that.
It is. It's athletic and problem solving. But if you think about combative sports, let's say boxing, for example, boxing is one of those sports that you have to have a certain amount of skill and athletic ability and movement. You could take somebody who's fairly unathletic and kind of let's say a schlub, and they can go to jits and they can do it and they can become pretty proficient and develop a game where you roll with them and they're like, all right, this guy's not bad. Boxing? Fuck no. You could give you could throw people into boxing and give them as much opportunity as they want, and a dude will walk in who's talented and just light them the fuck up. It's same in the NFL. There's a certain skill set. I can teach you, I can train you, I could give you every drug, I could do everything, and you'll go out there and your ability to be able to use your head and hands and hit and do all that, that's something that's it's like a light switch. It's on or off. And so what I really like about jits, and I've seen this all the time, guys come in and they're eyes are all big and this. And I'm like, just keep coming back. You'll eventually be pretty good at this. And your instructor will never give you a belt that you can't carry. So you'll just keep moving along. And then all of a sudden, a year from then, I'm like, fuck, you remember how shitty you were? You're pretty good. This was a good round. But in, boxing and pro football and some other sports, let's say running track, for example, we're going to go out and run the 100. I don't give a shit how much you train or with us. You're not going to win this thing unless you have a certain level. Yeah. So what I liked about CrossFit is you can bring people in, and there's this maturation process where they get pretty good at this skill and they can kind of do it just as the same way. I feel that the the cliff of like physical genetic kind of like that is just not as steep. And, you've seen this, Pat, where people come in and you're like, this person's never going to stick. And then all of a sudden a year later, they're like, killing people. Then you're like, I can't believe how far this guy's come. I mean, and like, I see that in jiu-jitsu as well too. Whereas I have not seen that in a lot of other places that, and I think it's great because it do people that like, gather this pride from it. And this is who they are and they identify. And it's great because it gives them community. It gives them identity more so than like, some of these other things where they're like, fuck, I just don't know how I would do this. So it's been great in that way. I think for the jiu-jitsu thing for men, because dudes are lonely. Like I feel that all the time whenever I meet guys over 40 and I talk to them about jits or they come and they train or this, like I feel like they're fucking lonely dudes. And I think what happens is men age, they become kind of lone wolves. And if they don't have like a good community of people around them, they just get kind of curmudgeon-y, if that's even a word. They become just kind of like a little prickly and just not very friendly. What I like about the jiu-jitsu is it like forces you to not be like neurologically crystallized. It allows you to be kind of flexible and learn new things, and different people come in, and it just it's added something to my life I didn't know I was missing. But I also think mentoring and working with the pros that I do has given me a crew of 20-something-year-old kids that I fucking needed to be around. I do way better when I have a crew of like young dudes to talk shit and have fun with and to go in and fight. Like my wife's like, this is so much better for you. You need to just be around young people all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be around a bunch of dudes my age. They got a bunch of like prostate problems and shit.
Well, I love that you kind of brought it all the way around full circle to understanding that what I would also say is that if you look at the best people at jiu-jitsu, they're a combination of athleticism, as well as all of the proficiency that you talked about and the thing that anyone can kind of have, which is some of that technique stuff, similar to CrossFit. The true best are athletes, and they are athletes that were by design. You look at a move and you're like, that's just gorgeous. Like there's a rhythm to that and a connection to that. And some people, and most won't ever have that. And like the reality is like, most don't need that to live a better life. They need to be in there doing it. And they're going to maximize their own personal potential. So to harken it back to that athleticism is the true greats will have that. But in my opinion, there are some who can, in the early years, who could just work by on straight grunt capacity. But I think these days you're going to have like true athleticism in order for it to be, especially if the tests are done well.
And I remember watching Rich Froning, for the CrossFit Games, just killing it. Yeah. And I was always like, man, like, I wonder how athletic he is. And then he posted a video of him playing flag football, and he had like a pretty good fucking, he fucking had a nice rollout. Like he's right-handed. He was rolling out to his left and he threw back across, he was rolling this way and he actually turned and he threw back across his body and it was a pretty nice shot. And I was like, oh, he's a pretty good athlete. Like, so like, that's, but I say the same thing about Usain Bolt. You watch Usain Bolt run these fast, and I watched a YouTube video of him playing soccer, and he was killing people, and I was like, oh, he's incredibly athletic. Like I knew he was, but I almost needed to see him move in space against in relation to other people, kind of like Rich. And I saw Rich, and I was like, oh yeah, this fucking story checks out. Yeah. It's very rare that like I always joke whenever I see Khalipa, Khalipa's over there killing it and they did the zigzag run and Khalipa and you're like, and he fucking,
but he was kind of exactly who I was thinking about when I said there's some people who just horses, just such a horse that they could make it far, but he never won after that first year, right? Because he was never the athlete that those other guys were. And that was just the reality of it. He was never as efficient. He was never as athletic. It was just the reality.
So he's
also pretty good at jits, apparently.
Well, yeah, he does jits. He's come and trained with us, and I know he's rolled. So what's hard with jiu-jitsu is just as good as you think you are, and then you show up and you roll with a guy like Shanji, and I know he rolled with Shanji and probably realized like, I thought I was pretty good, and then you roll with a guy who's one of the best, and you're like, Jesus Christ, like this is absolutely frightening to be like.
Did you watch that video of him and Tim?
Yeah.
That was so funny.
And Tim smashing him, and you watch Shanji like smash Tim, or you watch Victor and those guys smash Tim. So it's pretty funny to be like, oh wow, Tim's smashing that dude, and then like we go to wrestling and like you see Tim out there, and it's like it's like no matter how big a shark you see in the water, all of a sudden a bigger shark comes and bites you.
Yeah.
And then Victor won he won the main event for the UFC Fight Pass. And so he beat a guy named Nicky Rod, who's here in Austin. Had a really nice rear naked choke. It was the first time that Nicky had been submitted outside of a heel hook. And he had him, and his move is kind of like a body lock pass. And so we had been going in and doing body locks, and we're working on basically putting Victor in the worst position. So I was fucking cranking him, squeezing the shit out of him from this body lock. So then they get into the match, and he gets kind of into that position, and Victor escaped. And then when we were after, I was like, man, that was a pretty good escape. He's like, well, yeah, I'd escape your fucking body lock, and that dude ain't nearly as strong as you. So I was like fucking literally squeezing the shit out of him with everything I had. And he's like, as soon as he got in position, I was like, dude, if I can escape John, and I'm nowhere near the jiu-jitsu those guys are, but in that one position, like when they ask me to do it, like there's no way you're fucking getting me off of you. I'm like, I'm too strong. I'm like, yeah, this dude's like, I got this guy by 40 pounds and I'm fucking strong as shit. So it's kind of fun to be able to go in and train with some of the best guys and be able to help them get ready for their stuff and have a skill set. So it's been great. Like I said, it's been great for me just in terms of like picking up a new skill, but also like mentoring some young guys, and they're the best kids. Like Victor and Philippe and Arash and the guys that I train are like the best kids. Like I tell people, I'm like, you guys can bitch about immigrants all you want. I'll keep these kids. I'd adopt every single one of them. They are like have the biggest hearts, and they're the nicest kids. So it's kind of funny. Like, everybody's kind of anti-immigrant. It feels like, and they're trying to deport everybody. This seems like every time I turn on social media, and I'm like, not these kids. I'll take all these jiu-jitsu kids. You can just send them. I'll adopt every one of these kids. And I said, and if Trump and the cronies come, I'll totally fight for you guys. And that's what I told them. I was like, hey man, if anybody tries to deport you, just come to my house. I'll adopt you. I'll bring you out.
I don't want to keep you too long, John. I
gotta go shoot some guns.
Is there anything that you want anything you want the CrossFit community to know right now?
Hold on. You like just keep training. And for the most part, stay off social media. Social media is not real life. Like what happens in the existence of your gym and what you're doing. Like if somebody takes a shot at you, it doesn't diminish what you're doing. Have better confidence in yourself, and don't get so upset by sound bites. And if you do hear a sound bite, go listen to the whole argument. And especially, I know you listen to the podcast I did with Judd. Like I try to be extremely complimentary. All the clip that they got so excited about was just literally a 10-second clip of me talking about the creation of CrossFit football, cut in such a way that it was meant for clickbait, Right. So at the end of the day, like, why do you, and here's another thing too. I don't ask anybody's permission to do anything. So why do people feel like everybody else has to like be able to co-sign off of what they're doing? Like if you want to lift weights and you want to do it, like go do it. Who cares what other people think? Like I don't need validation. Like if two gay people want to get married, let them get married. Like who cares if somebody doesn't agree with it? Like if they're happy and that's who they are, then like let them be happy. If you want to pick up welding or forging or doing all this stuff, like do what makes you happy. Like stop searching for validation in other people. Judd doesn't like CrossFit. Okay, so what? He does something else. I like Judd. I think he's a smart dude, but I just was amazed at how upset they were that somebody wasn't co-signing on what they were doing. And I was like, why do you guys need anybody else's permission to do this stuff? Go have fun, lift some weights, fucking get after it. So That's my deal.
Yeah.
I don't ask anybody's permission for anything. So, well, dude, guys, thank you so much, dude. Pat, it was great to connect with you. Also, Todd, it was awesome to meet you. So hopefully if you got any cool projects you need me to come out, man, I'll be out there like a fucking big wheel train.
100%. I am going to hit you up. I realized that I have I texted you before. That's still your phone number?
Yeah. So
stoked. Well, I will shoot a message, man. I'd actually like to talk to you otherwise, but thank you so much for coming on here. And if there's ever anything we can do, let us know.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Later, brother.
See you.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Behind the Knowledge. Now, if you want help developing your coaching and to learn from us directly, check out the Knowledge Pro. There we host live calls with our coaches every week where we discuss content together and work on skills to improve our on-the-floor coaching ability. To learn more, you can head over to besthouroftheirday.com/the knowledge. And if you found this content helpful, We're going to be releasing new episodes every week, so subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.